What is going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Running and Gunning podcast with your host, Justin Sinan. I am stoked to have you joining us today. We have got a killer episode with my good buddy, Shan Twit. Shan is from Kentucky. We recently got together. We were going to do this one in person, but he got a last-minute phone call to go pick up his Bobcat mount. So we're doing this one virtually, and there's going to be a ton of great knowledge in this. We're going to do a little bit of what you should be doing right now as far as maybe trying to manage some of your private lands, some predator hunting, a lot of stuff, a lot of chores maybe you aren't thinking about right now that you can start writing down a little punch list on some chores to knock out and make your next season your best. So without further ado, Shan, how are you doing, brother?
I'm doing awesome.
Well, what's going on? I know. We spent pretty much like a day together. And from yesterday, we went out in the evening and we made about like 4 sets on a farm that I got to hunt and came really close. We had a bobcat that we were, I think, really, really close to. I think we might have bumped him from later on down the road. We found out with the snowfall we've got right now, we were able to track him kind of, and we saw his tracks on the way out. So didn't work out, but it was a blast, man. You taught me a ton as far as, how to approach predator hunting. I don't have a call yet, but I'm working on getting that. But yeah, I mean, why don't you give us a little breakdown? Shan has been on here before. I think it's been a while. I feel like maybe last season or something, or maybe before that. It's been too long, man. You're a wealth of knowledge, and really looking forward to this one. So with that being said, give a little breakdown for maybe some guys that didn't get to listen to that episode.
Well, we talked a little bit about mindset. We talked about different approaches to accessing your tree stands and different techniques. Today, I'd like to talk about this time of the year and the uniqueness of January through March, because you can go in and the scouting and prep, of course, for the next coming season starts literally within days of the previous season ending, in my opinion. And this time of the year, you can go in without any negative repercussions and how it's going to affect your hunt come September, October, November. And I love this time of year because you can truly see what the lay of your land looks like. You can see last year's rut signs. You can see last year's scrapes, rubs, pinch point bedding areas, especially if there's snow. You can find out where the high concentration of doe bedding areas are. And you can penetrate deep into those really, really sensitive areas and not worry about scent control and just have fun. You might pick up some sheds along the way, but you're going to learn a lot of the deer habits and why they move to an area, especially in spots that you stayed out of on purpose because you didn't want to booger the animals and kick them out to the neighbors so the neighbor kills them. So I love this time of the year, and this is the time of year to really do a lot of your postseason scouting, your timber stand improvements, hinge cutting, clear cut, select cuts, and then just kind of put pen to paper and kind of review how your season went prior and ask yourself, are you happy with the results? Are you seeing the numbers of deer, the caliber of bucks? Are if you're not punching your tag, are you getting close encounters? And with all the time, effort, and money that you spent into it, what is your return on your time and money and investment? Are you happy with the direction that your property is headed or not? And this is the time to really walk into those really sensitive areas and see what you've been missing. A lot of times I'll walk into areas like this time of year, and I think I know the area. I think I know the farm. And even after 3-4 seasons, I realized, gosh, I didn't know this, and I didn't know that. And this is why the deer are exiting this bedding area this way. And this is why that rub line is there. And that makes sense because it provides security cover, moving from one property to the next. Or this is how the bucks are avoiding me from my mistakes. Like, this is the time to do all that, and then put a plan together for the next hunting season. So I love this time of year.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think, we were talking about the snow, and it's just amazing how much the snow can really like paint a picture of your property that you may not see, otherwise, as far as the thickness of one area versus the other, or what you thought was thick is really not that thick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I picked up a lot on that just walking this farm with the snow being on the ground and just really getting a feel for these little narrow valleys and what these deer are doing. And I feel like for us, maybe we're like a semi-southern state where I wouldn't say we're like from deep south, but the effects that the snow have on these whitetails is kind of amazing to me. Growing up in an area where we would have more frequent snowfall, and the effects on the deer on the East Coast versus the Midwest kind of, or Southern, it almost just shuts them down for the first day. It seems like where I grew up at, man, like if it's snowing, you better get out there because they're going to be moving. Um, do you have any experience with that? I mean, am I right in saying that?
Well, no, you're 100% right. When deer are used to snow on a regular basis, they acclimate very quickly. It's no big deal. If you go from October to March and it snows once all year or twice, and you have a doe, for example, she's 5 years old and she's seen maybe 3 or 4 or 5 snowfalls her entire life, there's not an opportunity for that deer to get used to that and adjust their patterns accordingly. And so, they go to bed and they wake up or whatever. The next morning, there's 3 inches of the white stuff. The woods looks totally different to them. And they're like, it takes a day or two, I think, for the deer around here to acclimate to that. Now, I'm from Wisconsin where it snows in November, doesn't melt until the end of March, early April. So they're very much used to snow. But here, exactly, they're just, what is this? There's an acclimation period, I think, and they have to adjust accordingly. I think after an extended period of really cold weather, the deer around here, they tend to move really well the moment it starts to spike back up and warm back up.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's extremely cold, they just go into like a semi-hibernation mode for 2-3 days until the thermometer starts climbing again. It's weird for me coming from
It is,
the
man.
way
It's
up
a
north.
because like internally, I think we're like hardwired to oh, it's a awesome snow, good cold front, very very cold, but like I'm good with it. And then you go out there and you hardly see anything.
Right, it's
and
weird.
and having cell cameras is another great like inventory because it's like, was it me? Did they bust me? I'm like, I didn't kick up a single deer, but I noticed collectively over all the cell cams I'm running, there was no movement at all. So yeah, it just kind of helped, reassure that you, like you said, you got to capitalize on those warm swings because I feel like those deer, man, if it comes down to 20 and it goes to 50 the next day, reverse, what you may be used to here is a totally different story. So it just goes, I'm just learning more about Kentucky deer and like what every year's a little bit different, and going through your property and learning how they're using it is another thing. And I feel like the deer also use a property differently, on these colder temps and stuff like that, just for food is probably what it all revolves around.
It absolutely does. They live and die by their stomach. They have to eat every 4 or 5 hours. Keep that in mind. Whether you live a deer lives in Canada or northern Florida, that's apropos. Going back to what we were doing the last couple of days at your place, predator hunting. I've always said one of the most important and yet overlooked aspects of deer management is predator management. There's a lot of damage that coyotes and bobcat can do, and most people don't realize how vicious and how efficient of a killer a bobcat is. And if they want to decide to stalk on something, that animal's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so the turkeys, quail, deer, small game, they all benefit. But I feel like becoming a predator hunter helps me become a better deer hunter too. And especially that's why I get so giddy. I get so excited when it snows because you can see how that animal responded to your calling, the route it took, how it used the terrain to get into access to within easy, pouncing range of that caller, for example,
Mm-hmm.
And how to use the lay of land to your advantage so you stay hidden so that you can get into position without the potential for any predator off in the distance to see you. And you use that skill set for deer hunting too. It's only going to benefit your deer hunting success in the fall.
Absolutely. It was super interesting how many coyote tracks, especially on the one bigger farm that we went to that was mostly a field, like, and just seeing how much these dogs traveled that you would never, without the snow, you would never know, And just to be able to see, like, I mean, all over the place they were walking. We never got to see them. However, they were there, like, without a shadow of a doubt. And it just was like recognition. It's like, okay, well, this, and a lot of the tracks we found were fresh. So, um,
Very fresh.
yeah. So it's like, just because you don't kill them the first time doesn't mean they're not there. Like you had said over and over, they can travel miles in the matter of, an hour. It's not even a thing to them. So,
Exactly. And if you have a lot of coyotes on your property, because keep in mind, this isn't the 70s and 80s. The fur prices are terrible by comparison. People made a fortune trapping in the 70s and 80s, and nowadays it's like even those same guys that are old enough to still do it aren't doing it because, I mean, the return on their time investment is just not there. But if on your property you're hearing, seeing multiple coyotes throughout the fall hunting season, that influences the deer activity
mhm,
in a negative way.
right.
So, you know, you kind of have to do the dirty work sometimes to get
Yeah.
some of those predators thinned out. So, it can improve the quality of your deer hunt. I mean, even if they're not taking out as many deer as people think, it puts pressure on the does when they're dropping fawns in the spring, right? And they will bump bucks, and bucks that successfully are able to exit out of their bedding area, they will return back because they know, well, that worked last time. I want to repeat that. That's good. But that's stress. That's stressful, especially in the winter months. I mean, last season, collectively, the neighbor to the north and to the west of me decided, we all collectively agreed to pass on a really nice 8-point. And this buck is a 3-year-old in the 130 class. And he made it. He wasn't, he didn't have any puncture wounds from fighting, no arrow or bullet holes, and we found him just eaten out from coyotes. End of December, I think 28th was the last picture I got. And a few days later, we went out looking for sheds of another deer that we knew dropped early, and one of my buddies was off to my side, and he yells out, "No!" and he died. Like, we all knew this deer was gonna turn to a monarch,
Yeah.
and there was no. I mean, he wasn't underweight. He was extremely robust and healthy. But there was a lot of coyotes at the end of December, right after Christmas. I started to see coming through the area, and they got him,
Yeah.
and we found him.
Do you feel that, like,
Unfortunately,
coyotes, do they target younger deer? Will they, I mean, or does it not matter? Is it just a situation of, like, they come across a deer and a pack of them decide, like, it's on, and they chase it down and kill it? Is that generally
well,
how
I
they
mean,
operate?
coyotes will do the same thing as wolves, but on a smaller scale. They'll run through an area, and they know they can smell, if a deer is diseased or sick or bleeding, cut from some injury, and they will run that deer down until they realize, okay, it's either worth our time and effort to continue pushing this animal or not.
Hmm.
Um, they do have an impact. I mean, more so in the spring. Studies have shown that more so in the spring. And a lot of guys will post trail cam pictures of coyotes with a deer leg or a doe head in its mouth as a coyote triggers a sensor, and then they get blamed for, like, killing a lot of. I don't think they normally kill a lot of mature deer, unless you have those bucks that are run down excessively post rut,
Hmm.
and they don't have the time it takes to recover, and then a pack of 5 or 6 coyotes find them. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a chance that they're going to bring them down and kill it.
Yeah.
But they do a lot of damage in the spring, especially bobcat too.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen
Unfortunately.
plenty of pictures of bobcats even killing deer. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable to me, honestly, that a 30-pound animal can, take down a grown deer. But I've seen them in person. It does make sense. I mean, they're pretty vicious. That is one thing I hope I never get attacked by. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, you probably won't make it out.
Yeah, I've trapped a couple this year. I know you're aware of that, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really just, they are just such a pretty animal, man. Like, it's just
Mm-hmm.
amazing when you actually get to see one, because they're so recluse. A few of us, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure, have been fortunate enough to see them in the wild. But I think the coolest thing for predator hunting to me is, like, you're done. You're kind of in this, like, little depression. Season's over. What am I going to do with my time? Predator hunting is not only a great way to benefit your property, but it's a great way for you to get out and have fun, in the outdoors. You're covering ground, so not only are you're out there, you're able to scout a little bit, and you're going to go have some fun. And I mean, that's really what the outdoors are all about. So if you guys aren't thinking about it, here's your sign. Try to get out there, try to find somebody in your area that, I know you, Sean, I mean, it's one of those things when if I give you a phone call, it's like, hey, I've got a ton of predators. You've got the call. All right, cool, man. Well, I'd be happy to come help you and we can have fun. I feel like it's one of those. It's one of the few, kind of things you can get into, and you can call somebody and have them assist you, and they're more than welcome to do it. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, and number one, it keeps your skills sharp. It keeps your woodsmanship skills sharp. It keeps your shooting skills sharp. And whether you're a duck hunter, upland bird game hunter, waterfowl, or a predator hunter, I mean, the more time you spend in the outdoors, the more you learn, the better hunter you become, better killer you become, and that bleeds over into archery for deer or gun hunting even for deer. We do primarily archery, but it keeps your skills honed so you're prepared for when that moment of truth arrives. It really is nice because, yeah, it's the camaraderie going with good friends. You learn about the lay of the land. You're helping the deer herd. You're keeping your skills sharp. There is no downside, and it's part of being a good steward. I mean, you have to do, like I said, the dirty work. It's good to manage the entire animal herd, not just putting food plots and water holes for deer. I mean, like there's more to it than that, and it's something that really benefits all game. I've
Yep.
noticed that by taking out more coyotes on one of my main farms, I've seen the gray fox population spike. I've seen more bobcat move into the area, and by taking out the coyotes, man, I saw 21 does in one of the food plots on the far west end of the main farm that I hunt. Came out from the neighbors single file, 21 in a row. And all of them I noticed on video looked very healthy and robust and just, not skin and bones, not the ribs showing, just very, very healthy. And, by removing predators, in addition to providing enough food, cover, water, and keeping your pressure down to a minimum just from a deer hunting perspective, when you thin out those coyotes, it reduces, the pressure, and the does, they have, healthier lactation rates. The bucks tend to hold on to their antlers longer. They tend to be healthier because it's just one less thing that they have to worry about when you minimize the predator population.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important.
And also, guys, if you are not aware of, Sean has a business, and he is doing habitat improvement. You're pretty much a whitetail consultant. If you guys
Mm-hmm.
have some private land, and you're within the area of Kentucky, Ohio region around there, contact Sean. He's also got a killer YouTube channel with some awesome content on just predator hunting, all kinds of improvements. So get on there, subscribe to his channel. I guarantee you'll walk away with something. And you're doing a killer job putting out some great content too, man.
Yeah, thanks. It's called maturewhitetailstrategies.com. And what I do is I go into a person's property, walk it with them. I like to walk the first time solo, so I don't have any biased information from the landowner. Okay, just I want to see what I see and learn what I want to learn from the property before you speak into my ear. Walk your property and just kind of see what kind of cards you have to deal with. Where's your thickets? Where's your water source if you have any? Do you have any food plots? Where are they located? How are they designed? Where your standing cameras located? And then basically put a plan together for after learning the information about your property, how I personally would hunt that property. Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So if you've owned a property, let's say for 10, 15 years, and you've not taken even a mature buck, let's say 4, 5 years old, and you're putting a lot of time, a lot of effort, blood, sweat, and tears and money into that, but your return is not what it should be based on the area and the quality habitat, the deer sign that you're seeing, so on and so forth. If you continue to do what you've always done, you'll continue to get what you've always gotten. And sometimes getting a different perspective is all that's needed to take your hunting to the next level. And that's what I do.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's solid, and you're a great advocate for it. I think you're definitely finding your niche doing this stuff. You're great at it. You helped me a little with our property, and I've seen this year some results coming out of it too. So really looking forward to next season. But let's get into a little bit of that, man. Like let's just say we've got a guy with 100-acre property that he's able to hunt and do a little bit of improvements on. What would you kind of say to somebody in those boots? What should guys be doing right now? Should they be kind of holding off and maybe for March or February? What are your thoughts?
Well, you have to get out when you can, based on your family life and your work life, right? I mean, you have to go out when you can, but that's why hiring someone to do the walking for you is beneficial, and then you'll get a perspective from somebody else because you have a bias, like you have a bias based on what you've seen on your property, and when you have someone that doesn't have the emotional connection and just tells you what you have, that's more objective, and that helps, right?
Mhm.
This is a really good time because, like I said, you can walk and grid search every square inch of your property, and it's not going to affect negatively your hunt come September, October. This is the time to find out, all right, where do saddles meet benches, meet funnels, and pinch points meet food sources? Where are your food? What's the quality of water? How far do the people, how far do the deer have to travel to access water? Is the water on the neighbors? Do you need to install water holes? Do you need to have more observational stands, okay, so that you're not penetrating deep into the sensitive areas early in the season, and then as the season progresses, you can kind of move closer and closer to where the deer are bedding, okay? These are all things that you need to learn, and there's no shortcut other than walking the property. This is the best time to do it.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Um, as far as like bedding areas and stuff like that, maybe for some of our guys that are newer that, aren't as experienced, what are some things that you really try to concentrate on when you're focusing on bedding? Like, what are you looking for that like maybe somebody that doesn't have the knowledge can relate to,
Okay, well, like sometimes people look at their property in the spring and summer and say, well, that area is kind of, quote, thick. And it might be, but come November, it's not so thick. The air travels right through it. It doesn't provide thermal cover. It doesn't have enough cover to get away from pressure from both you and the neighbors. Okay. Sometimes a person might have uh, late successional growth trees that are not providing any thermal cover and or food, and so sometimes the person needs to, you know, gas up the old chainsaw and do a little hinge cutting to kind of open up that canopy and create bedding where it doesn't exist. Sometimes the bedding area that is of good quality habitat on your farm is in a bad location for you to actually hunt. So if you have, let's say, access from the north and you're hunting with most southeast, south, and southwest winds, that's fine. But what happens if your bedding areas are on the north end of your property and you're forced to come in from the south? Well, you might want to create some more bedding areas in areas on the property that are more conducive so that you can come in from downwind more often and not blow your scent in the areas that are more sensitive.
yeah.
So again, to determine where that needs to happen, I need to walk it. And aerial maps are great. I was just talking with a guy that he subcontracts for me, and he's up in Wisconsin. And he's coming down in about a week and a half, and we're going to a property not too far from where my wife and I live here. And I'll be walking it for the third time, and he's going to come in and do some hinge cuts in 3 different spots. And he's a professional; it's what he does for a living, and it's a dangerous thing to do is hinge cutting. And
Yeah.
you can scar the land, and you can mess it up, you can make it worse, and so it's difficult, it's dangerous, and so you want to hire someone that knows what they're doing and has a lot of experience with hinge cutting.
Okay.
Sometimes hinge cutting is not good.
Right. And
I don't
running
recommend
saws
hinge
too.
cutting for. I'm sorry.
I said, and running saws too in general. I mean, like not all of
Yeah,
us out there are Paul Bunyan. I mean, like
yeah.
it's not a safe thing. And I think there's a lot of misinformation online about how to properly hinge cut. And, coming from my experience, I'm not an expert. I try to learn as much as I can from YouTube. And I have seen multiple different videos of how to do this and how not to do this, and they're very conflicting. So
They are.
I really hope that that you do some. I know you're going to do some great video of this guy
Hmm.
hinge cutting, but I'm looking forward
Hmm.
to that a lot because it's something that I'd like to get better at doing. I don't get to do much of it, but
Yeah, and sometimes, so let's say the person's primary motivation and financial situation is such where they want to pull some money out of that property, and rightfully so, to help offset their expenses, their tax bill, whatever. Maybe select cut or clear cutting might be better for that landowner. In the case where a person's finances are really healthy and they don't need the extra income, they can just hinge cut even the dead or dying, non-desirable, non-fruit bearing, non-thermal providing cover trees and just create pockets of bedding area and has no interest in whether or not, they pull a lot of money out of their black walnuts or the red oak, from the property, and they want to keep those um, because it provides the best for the deer. But everyone's situation is different.
Mhm.
And you don't know that until you walk it. I mean, aerial maps are great. Like I was talking with this gentleman that's coming down to do the hinge cutting. We were just talking about his own personal property. Matter of fact, we're both on the phone looking at some aerial maps and kind of chatting about what he can do for his own property where he and his wife live. And an aerial map doesn't really tell you as much as you think it does. I mean, it shows you the property lines, it shows you where the tax address is and how many acres the person owns, but it doesn't show you where the pinch point funnels within funnels are, the bedding areas, the rubbing. It doesn't show you every species of tree, okay, the invasive species, okay, that should be hack and squirted or removed entirely, okay. It doesn't tell you all that. So there is no shortcut but then to put boots on the ground and walk your farm to see what you have for cards to deal with, and that's what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That and it's a lot of information, and that's why it's good to hire somebody. I think especially if you have your own property that is a good size. Like you just said, Sean. I mean, you could literally pay for your fees in timber. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
easily.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you're so much better off dealing with somebody that knows what they're doing versus you taking the steps in your own hands because you saw a YouTube video on how to do this and then you can't recover from it.
You can't.
That was part
Yeah.
of my, thinking, like I felt like I'm a knowledgeable hunter, but I'm not a timber stand improvement guy. I'm not, we all, you got to swallow your ego a little bit, I feel like. And,
Hmm.
when it comes down to it, there's a ton of stuff that we all have to learn. And it's a good situation, man. So,
So one guy has a property, and I've hunted his property for many years, and the amount of veneer black walnut that he pulled off his property, he made over 50,000
right.
in just the walnut. I mean, talk about a
How
really
many
really
acres
good
was it?
situation. Uh, 15.
15.
15, yeah.
Oh
He
my
owned several
goodness.
hundred, but where these walnut were in a small little section,
Yeah.
and they were all, I mean, ancient walnuts. And I
Wow.
thought, oh my God, how much? What are we talking about here?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just off the charts.
That's crazy.
Um,
I love walnut. Like
yeah,
dark walnuts, probably my favorite. Like to see like epoxy tables and stuff like that. I've always,
oh, they're beautiful.
yeah, something about that. I've always loved that color. But yeah, man. I
Yeah,
mean, that's the one thing. It's like with what we did at my house. I mean, we did a couple of hinge cuts, and the deer absolutely just almost every time come from that area. They
hmm,
may not be bedding in it, but they always transition right through that because it's just the perfect location for it. So thank you for that. I appreciate it, man.
yeah,
What are some other things? I mean, as far as let's talk about some food plots.
yeah.
I'm really at the point, where I feel confident that I'm getting better each year with doing food plots. But where I've always struggled and tried to cut shortcuts, which is what you should not do, is on soil. What are
Yeah.
your advice? What's your advice for like this time of year? Is it too late in the year to kind of get a jump on that, or are we right on?
No, I mean, come up here shortly. I'll be putting out some lime on one of the properties, especially, for example. You have to look at the edge of any natural openings or places where you have food plots in the past and see what are the tree species that border the outside perimeter of that opening. Okay, for example, on this one farm I hunt, there are a lot of walnuts. And I love walnuts, okay, they're cool, but they don't really provide a lot of food, okay, benefit to deer or thermal cover. And their nuts are very acidic. It drops the pH of the soil. So there's constantly like a pH, issue along that edge, and they're more prone to growing weeds and grass and undesirable stuff, right? So I'm going to be liming the outside edge where the crown of all those walnuts kind of drape along the edge of that food plot on the north end of this, the north and the east end of one of my plots. And so that's a constant thing. And then there's also Don Higgins has a new product coming out. It's with humic acid and helps to retain water and nutrients, and it helps benefit the soil so that even after rain, the rain's not just kind of passing right through, but it stays in that soil and helps retain the moisture. So when you're adding any type of fertilizer and you're adding your seed, it doesn't just like, melt right through to the bottom. It stays near the surface where the plants are that you're putting in for your food plot can benefit. Um, and that's really, really beneficial for, sandier soils too, that they drain right away, even after a fresh rain. So the humic acid is something that I'm looking into, but that's a really beneficial product. But this is a good time, a year to put out your lime, help the pH of your soil so that the plants don't have to work as hard to grow. And, everyone has a skill set. To get back to what you said earlier, I like to stay in my lane. I'm the guy that kind of puts the overall 10,000 foot view plan in together. This is what you should do, where you should do it. And then I have a couple guys that help me cross the finish line faster, more effectively. I've got a food plot guy. I've got a hinge cut, trail cutting guy. And so they're very good at what they do. And I let them just do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Like you said, you can't do everything. And there's only
No.
so many hours in a day. So if you want to go fast, go solo. If you want to go far, go with the team. So.
Right. Yeah, man. I love it. It's absolutely the truth too. In your experience, so I've got, a woods plot. Would it benefit me to remove as many leaves as I can from the soil? Because I've always been told, like that the leaves kind of put more acid into the soil. Is that the case, or is it more the nuts that do that?
Well, with the case of walnuts, it's more the nuts,
Okay.
right? With oaks, oak leaves, as you know, they stay on the trees long, and they also don't break down as quickly as other tree species. But the biggest thing, and more important, I think, is just open up the canopy as much as possible so the sunlight can get in there.
Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to have successful food plots with a good yield, a lot of tonnage of food, when it's a small plot surrounded by large canopy trees that shade out.
Yeah, the growth.
They shade out the woodlot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And any chance that you've gotten into a situation where it makes more sense to, electric fence the property or your food plots? When do you get into situations like that?
Okay. So, myself personally, I had a bad experience last year. Planted at the right time of year, early May. Okay. Tons of rain that first 7 to 10 days. The timing was perfect, and we planted that way. Problem is, the surrounding farm to the north of where I hunt did not have both beans and corn, but all corn last year. So where did all the pressure go? The deer put all the pressure on my little 3 to 4 acre bean plot.
Mm-hmm.
So they overbrowsed the heck out of it. And then when the deer knocked down the soybeans down to nothing, now that opened up the canopy, and instead of the soybeans, growing to maturity and then shading out the understory, the ground, so that the weeds wouldn't take over, the weeds took over, right? Because there's no
Right.
beans because the deer. So, should I have invested in electric fence? Well, yeah, you're darn right I should have, but it's like you look at, okay, everything's sprouting within, 4 or 5 days. It's going really good. And then, maybe check it for a few weeks, and again, they're like, oh my God, it's nipped off at the top. And, okay, but it's still early yet. I can get away with it. And then a few weeks go by, and you realize, oh God, I should have really fenced it in. And oh yeah, all the deer are coming from the neighbors, and they're pounding my beans every night. I was driving a drone over the top in early August, late July, and it was not uncommon to have 15, 17, 18 deer in my 3 acre plot, just pounding it, an hour and a half before the end of light.
Yeah, that's the biggest
And
problem
that
I've
did
run
not help.
into. No, it really doesn't. And then it seems like it's always at the most unopportunistic time. Like,
Yeah.
my food plot's looking beautiful and it's nice and lush. And I think that it'll survive through a little bit of a drought, like maybe a 2 week drought. And then all the deer move in and just completely smash it, and then it's done. So,
Oh man. Yeah.
you can do your very best, and a lot of times you can't do anything to control Mother Nature. And I've learned, especially here in Kentucky, we have always got a drought around August and September.
I know.
And like my main chore for myself this year is to try to figure out a means of watering my food plots without bringing a hose down there. So I'm kind of trying to get creative, maybe with buying like a IBC tote, filling it up and doing a watering system like that with maybe either with the side by side, or hook up a pump sprayer and a battery and try to launch some water out there. I'm not sure. I mean, have you run into situations like that where you kind of have to water and you don't have any way to hook up a hose around by your plot?
Yes. If you're lucky enough to have a creek bottom that retains water even during a drought real close by, you can rent pumps, and you can run the hose to sprinkler systems, and you can do it that way. You can do it by hand, which takes forever unless it's a half acre plot or smaller. I mean, it takes a long time. There's a lot of effort there. Another way is to put a tank in the back of a four-wheeler or UTV and do it that way. It depends on the situation. If it's a hilly, well-drained soil, it's going to be a challenge with no water source close. There's no easy way to say this, but that's going to be tough.
Yeah,
It's going to be tough. I mean, you're at the mercy of Mother Nature.
you are. And I mean, like you and I had talked, it's like I don't want to drive this side by side through my woods, during deer season at all. Or
No,
really, like after a month leading up to season, I don't want to put any equipment in there. It
you
doesn't
shouldn't.
it doesn't bother them, but I 100% noticed a difference from this season to last season in the amount of daylight buck activity and doe activity. Everything in general went way up from not running a side by side to check on this or that, or go throw a bag of corn out here or there. Like, didn't do any of that this year. If I did put corn down, it really did benefit me actually during rifle this year to put corn down. I saved a lot of my good bucks. I saved them from that opening weekend. Um,
Yeah,
so
that's smart. Right
I'm
before,
not,
yeah.
yeah, I'm not a huge advocate. I don't want to shoot a deer over a corn pile, but I mean, like, it's a heck of a way to save your deer herd if you want to.
Every little bit helps, man. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, especially if the pressure surrounding you is like World War III. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
every opening weekend, and if you can at least a week to 10 days prior, pull them into the middle with baiting if legal, or mineral deposits,
Yeah.
or I mean, if your food plot is crushed, I mean,
What else are you supposed to do, right? And that's what happened to me. I
it,
I intended on my food plots to hold the deer on our property and protect them, and it just didn't work out. I mean, like I said, it looked phenomenal all the way up to like late August and September, and then we had that drought, and it's like, well,
mhm.
what can I do? I can't,
It
I
was
can't do
bad.
anything. Yeah.
It was bad. I tried to save my bean plot by broadcasting purple top turnips and
Hmm.
radishes into it, and they started to take off good for about 2 weeks, and then the drought just came again. Like, we had a little bit of rain at the
Yep.
halfway through the rain
It
drought, and
germinates,
then
sprouts, and
and
then
then it came
dies.
popping up, and boom, and then they crushed it again with the drought and the browse pressure.
Mm-hmm.
It's a timing thing. I mean, I've had other neighbors close by that planted 10, 14 days before I did, and that's just the amount of time that they needed to get the advantage. And their bean plot was amazing until, I mean, it's still high, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, man. It's a timing thing, and if you can't get out because of work or family, or both, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It is a timing thing.
You do, absolutely. I mean, you got to set your goals and see them through. I think that's a whole nother major topic. If you're trying to improve your property, to set yourself some goals and try to stick to them. I know it was challenging for me because like I really wanted to check some trail cameras here and there, but I stayed out. I tried to stay course to the plan and remove as much of my pressure as possible. Whether you want to look at it that way or not, like I think one of the biggest things with doing improvements on a property is staying the heck out. And
Mm-hmm.
we had talked about that when you were here. I'm like, man, like I didn't hunt a specific property until the end of October, and it was phenomenal. The hunting was great, like all through the rut. I had a great hunt, and I think a lot of people would have probably dived in sooner, and maybe it wouldn't have been as good. And I
Mm-hmm.
think doing that right now and really trying to assess your weaknesses and in your game, and why didn't you have a successful season? I mean, how do you kind of talk to some of your customers about that? Because I'm sure they don't want to hear you saying some of the things that you're saying. Like, it's kind of like a rocky road to go down with some people. But
Yes. Well, discipline is everything. When you have an itch and you want to scratch it, I want to go back there to replenish some mineral. I want to go back there just to see how my plot's doing. I want to go back there to replace the batteries on my cameras I haven't gotten to in weeks. It's very, very difficult to convince someone to hurry up and wait. And more isn't better. Usually less is better. Because every time you go in there, even if it's right during a very heavy windstorm or right before a heavy rain front, I mean, you're going to disturb the area to some extent, whether you're aware of it or not, with very few exceptions. I mean, so you have to pick your battles and be very strategic with when you go in. I'd rather have, the right 10, 15, 20 acres than the wrong 200 acres, with too much pressure. A deer doesn't care if you're picking morel mushrooms, you're turkey hunting, deer hunting, food plotting, checking stands, hanging stands. He doesn't care, especially the mature bucks, right? So if you're talking about 1 and 2 year olds, that's one thing. If you're talking about 4, 5, and 6 year old deer, they don't have the patience for repeated intrusions into their inner sanctums or sanctuaries. They just don't like it. I mean, neither would you, right? If you're
right.
constantly being bombarded by sales reps at your door every time, your living room door. I mean, you're not going to want to come to the door ever again. And you're going to want to move.
they've made it this far in the game. Once they've hit that 4-year mark, it's like they didn't make it that far by hanging around people and oh, okay, well, I seen Bob come out here the other day, let me just go check on him and see what's going on. No, it doesn't work that way. And
No.
I think some people need to understand that, and they may not, that like hunting mature deer is hunting a completely different animal than what you're used to. And I think, I'm not trying to bloat, but it's like, I think sometimes we forget about that because like our brains kind of focused into like trying to target mature deer for such a long time. And for somebody that's, newer to hunting, they may not understand that or grasp that like it really is that sensitive. Like,
Yeah, I had a conversation with a client not too long ago, and I said, what I want you to do is this year for 2023, this last season, is hunt the way you would hunt I'm not going to give you any advice. I want you just to hunt the way you and your wife want to hunt. But I want you to take a journal and write down when you see mature bucks, date, time, temperature, what's the conditions like, what part of the farm, is there any consistency with that, where the deer enter the food plots, where they exit, are they doing that consistently, so on and so forth. And then, go through and say, all right, were your goals met? Did you see what you should have seen, okay, in your opinion? Did you spook deer on the way in and the way out? How often? Going old school, just writing down on a piece of notepad, just just keeping a journal of what you're seeing is really beneficial. But like I said, less is more. Fewer intrusions, the better.
yeah,
They live out there 24/7. We just kind of come in periodically and then we go back to our normal modern day living. But I tell people, a mature buck is like, like if I came to your house and I didn't steal anything, right? But I snuck into your bedroom to play a prank on you and I moved your bed 5 feet over and then left. The moment you came home, you're like, who in the hell's in my house? You're going to put security cameras up. You can stay in a hotel for 2 weeks until like the authorities, check everything out. Like
right.
you're going to know someone was in your house.
You're on alert.
You're on alert. Okay. It's the same thing with mature bucks. I mean, now you will create de facto quote sanctuaries by just leaving certain areas around. Like you don't have to plant tall switchgrass and miscanthus to like, necessarily, to box in and provide plot screen on every single food plot, but just and that might be really beneficial, and it is, okay. But what I'm saying is like just if there's certain areas that you just stay out of, no matter what, outside of maybe March when you want to go in there and look for some sheds. I mean, you just no matter what, or unless a deer goes in there to die, you stay out of there. Deer will find those areas, and I don't care if it's 5 acres or 2 acres or Mr. Big knows where he doesn't see, hear, or smell any intrusion whatsoever, and he will, as long as that stays that way, he will stay there. But the moment you start bumping them, the 1 and 2 year olds, they will tolerate 2, 3, 4, 5 intrusions, and still stay in the area. But the big ones, they have very little patience for that, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
No, I agree with you 100%. It's definitely one of those things that you just kind of discover after time of, you doing the wrong things, how you should be doing them right, just like life.
Exactly.
It is what it is. But I mean, I think one of the biggest things, if you were to ask me what people should be doing right now, is I would say focus on trying to create the best entry and exit routes to your best stands. And right now is the perfect time to be doing that because
Mm-hmm.
you can go in there and make all the noise you want, cut whatever you need out of the way, and it'll generally be, within, without you having to trim a couple little things here or there, you're going to create the scenario that you need. Hanging sets. I mean, it sounds weird to like go hang a set, but go take if you've got a mobile stand, go take that with you and go
Mm-hmm.
sit in your stand and trim out whatever you need to trim out. If you know that's where you need to be next year, then you better damn right get out there and make sure it's right. It's going to save you a ton, and it's going to keep you from, bumping that deer. I mean, this whole podcast is dedicated to mobile hunting. I me and Sean both talked about is like, okay, well, how many mobile sets do you have, or how many pre-hung sets do you have? And Sean was like, man, a majority of my really good stands are pre-hung sets because I don't want to make any noise. And if you're able to do that, then I mean, by all means, that's what you should be doing. At the least, you should be prepping out these stands and marking them on your Onyx for next year, so that tree is ready
Mm-hmm.
to roll and you don't have any limbs in your way of your shooting lanes. Because in my opinion, I think that's one of the best things to try and get done right now. It's like those really good spots that
Dude,
you're still thinking about. Get them prepped.
100%. Like 100%. There is and use the human brain and our intelligence to our advantage, right? Like deer are adaptable and they're in tune with their surroundings, but they're not smart like you and I are smart. We know when the season starts. They don't, other than okay, in September, October now, there's a lot of people around. I'm hearing and seeing people all over. But if you can manipulate the habitat and you have some control over who comes and who goes and how often, then you can set all your access points to your stand locations now well in advance and use the element of surprise in your favor. Truly, on one farm that I hunt, there's two other people there's a husband and wife couple, and then there's another gentleman that works for the farmer. And so, I mean, luckily it's a large area, but there are some other people. I see them in person. I see them on trail camera. No big deal. It's not my property. I can't do anything about it anyway. But so I just have to hunt the people hunting, so I know how the big deer are going to avoid them. So to your point, I will go in. I did this after I was pretty much done hunting. My number one hit list buck on the one farm was killed, and the other one just still hasn't shown up. So I put some time into that other farm. And what I did is I prepped tree stand locations, both for a single set and a double set, one to film for the other. Cut all the vines, cut some trails and stuff, and I got all that done right before. Actually, the rain was already starting, but I did it right before a heavy rain because there was a possibility I was going to be hunting with a good friend of mine from out of state, and that never came to fruition. But those spots were prepped in case we got the green light. We're going to go in. And so those spots are prepped already now for next season. So if and when I see other people on the farm, I mean, I can kind of leapfrog around them,
Right.
and I won't have to like hang my stands that stick out like a sore thumb. That because I had stands stolen on that property too, and
Yeah.
there's no way to prove who did it.
Right.
But so it's private, but I mean, it's kind of like public property in essence, because there's other traffic, there's other people, and the access is huge. And so my access routes are already planned for October, November of 2024, and I did some of that work even while this last season was still open, because your access is everything. You have to have good access, because again, once a deer knows he's being hunted, especially the mature bucks, gosh, he becomes really hard to kill after that.
Oh yeah, I'd say
Yeah,
every sit it gets more and more difficult, and
yeah,
even being mobile, it's like, yeah, you blew it over here, man. Like you're only gonna blow it so many times. Like
that's
there's gonna
right.
be, I guarantee you, there will be a deer at some point that you run into that you can just smack on the ass and he won't leave. But they're rare, in my opinion,
They
from
are.
what I've come across. Yeah, generally, you know, if you bump them a couple times, like you're probably not going to see them again. And you
Yeah,
know,
unfortunately.
our friend Justin Hollinsworth, it brings me back to a story that he had one time of one of his older buddies had told him like, "Hey, why aren't you seeing this deer?" He's like, "Man, I know this deer's in here. I'm seeing him all the time." I'm like, I'm on his tail, and he's like, "Mount a freaking camera on your tree that you've been hunting him on." And sure as shit, here comes this buck trailing him like a dog all the way to his stand. So what he did
Hmm.
was manipulate that deer, set up where he came from, and he killed him the next day. Got
Yeah,
creative.
very, very
You
smart.
know, it's
Very
just a
smart.
proof in point of what we're talking about. But
Yeah. I mean, you look at the studies showing how many olfactory receptor cells we have, in our nose compared to whitetail deer. I mean, just like it's off the charts. It's such a disparity. It's not even fair to compare. Their sense of smell is just, it is so in tune. And, there's so much emphasis on the scent that you leave while on stand. And that doesn't, I mean, your best scent control is your stand location itself, coupled with your access to that stand, right? If you have the best location, you're downwind of all travel routes, bedding and feeding areas, okay, and that's great. But to get to that stand, you have to go through a bedding area or tall grass and everything that you're walking through, you're touching, leaving scent. I mean, that great stand is going to turn into a terrible stand really quickly.
mm-hmm.
It
And
is what
I'm
it
going to
is.
make a very valid point. If you are listening and you're in Kentucky or a southern state, none of us want to be out there doing this shit during the summer. Okay, let's be real.
No,
I
nope.
firmly hate scouting in the summer. I'll be the first to talk about it. I can't stand the chiggers, the turkey mites, whatever you want to call them.
The chicks,
They
the
suck.
poison
And
ivy.
yeah, so in my opinion, this year more than any other year, I am really focusing on prepping all my stuff as much as possible while it's cold and I can enjoy it and not sweat my ever loving body out there. You know, it's gonna happen. I guarantee you, I'm gonna have something happen and I'll have to do it. But the more you can minimize that, the better, and the less scent you're putting in the
Mhm.
woods. So Sean, I've got one. I got one question for you, and I've been asking a lot of guys this, and I really enjoy this. For me personally, I've learned more from failure than success, and a lot of people have. What is one thing that you know, one maybe story of a buck or something that has happened that really helped shape, you know, you to be the bow hunter that you are? What is like a really cool story maybe of a specific buck that taught you something that you still hold on to this day?
A buck that I call Tower. To this day, he's still my biggest bow kill. And on this one farm, I watched from a pile of mulch, cut and churned up mulch that this farmer dumped in his bean field. Very large mounds of mulch. Okay, and he would spread that mulch out nice and thin over his beans. But before he did that, I would in the summer I sit on top of that pile of mulch, and I was watching, gosh, there were 7 bucks come out of this little 5.5 acre long, narrow, rectangular strip of cover on the northeast corner of this bean field. And so whenever we had a north, northeast, southeast wind, I could be far enough away from that patch of cover and I could observe from a distance. And I was seeing this deer come out. And one of the takeaways was just the idea of thinking outside of the box in general and not pigeonholing yourself into only one approach to killing a deer, because sometimes you can force a round wooden dowel into a square peg hole, but it's not natural, right? So sometimes you don't want to hunt based on where you think the deer should be, but you have to hunt where they are and where they want to go, right? And I was watching this little woodlot from a distance, and he would come out in this one little corner almost every time, not every time, but almost every time. And fast forward to the third week of October, and he's on his feet more. He's coming to bed a little bit later than usual. He's on his feet in the evening earlier, okay, and he's coming back to the bed later and later, okay, because it's getting cooler, okay. And I waited until we had a northeast wind, and I slipped into this patch of grass that's maybe 40 yards by 100 yards long, and it's thick, nasty, gnarly briars and poison ivy, and the farmer can't combine that little section of grass because it's too steep. So I sat down in there with a little turkey blind seat, and I shot the deer at 16 yards. And I watched for, I think, 7 or 8 days until I got the wind perfect. And then I slipped in, and he was forced to come in with a slight tailwind / quartering wind. And I was downwind of, and the 3 bucks that he was with had to come out first before he came out. And like the Red Sea parting, when he showed up on the scene, they just all kind of, gave him a wide berth. And I came to full draw and stuck him at 16 yards. But that hunt taught me to be patient, to be observant, to not rush in too early because I'm all excited, thinking more is better, more is better.
Uh-huh.
And I tell clients this all the time. You see a bunch of deer on your last sit Wednesday night, you're like, oh, God, that was so awesome. I saw a nice shooter. And you go back and he hunts Thursday. Now he's seeing 6 deer instead of 15. And so, okay, maybe it was that I just didn't get lucky, and maybe he moved out of the area, but he'll be back. So I'm going to go back and hunt again on Friday, and then go back on Saturday. And by Saturday, he's seen 2 does, a mature doe and a fawn, and that's it. And there's no bucks at all because he's tapping the same well too aggressively, not being patient, not staying back, not being observant. And that hunt taught me a lot to hurry up and slow down and watch from a distance if you can, if the terrain allows it. Or watch from a distance on a camera, okay? Not necessarily physically watching, field edges from a distance, but watching, cameras, watching the field, okay, from a distance and being patient and only going in there surgically to remove that deer when the timing is right and there's a weakness, there's a chink in his armor, okay? And just observing. And you only do that from screwing up, like you said, enough.
Right. I'm really learning. I think that's one of my biggest things that I'm learning, like from this season, is the fine line between being aggressive and being too passive. And I really wanted to try to observe, do way more observation sits and then plan that attack move.
Yeah.
And I just, there were so many times where I couldn't get the wind exactly how I wanted it, or it would say the wind was this, and then I get there and it's doing complete opposite. And I'm like, what do I do? And I pulled a couple aggressive moves and it just didn't work out. But, I think that's just something that comes with being a hunter, man. And honing your skills every year. It's like, you gotta push the boundary every once in a while and not be afraid to screw things up. And if you do, you walk away and you learn from it. But, that's where that
pain's a good teacher.
Little 10% of luck comes into play. You know what I mean? It's like, you can plan all you want, but sometimes if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Yeah, pain's a good teacher. I mean, financial pain, physical pain, relationship pain. I learned from just screwing shit up. And I went going back to the whole client relationship. I had a client that I went to his farm. And I actually posted this video on my Instagram page. And I went up, we hung a double set for both he and his wife, a ladder stand for his wife, and then a hang on for him. And I wanted to know with a west-southwest wind what the wind direction was doing once we got the stand set up and we're up there at that height. What is our scent doing with that wind direction from that location, right? Went up there and had a military grade smoke bomb, and it was purple smoke, and you could see it bellowing, out to 150 yards out above the little bench down below that stand. And it was a powerful visual to show in that location at that time with that wind that the scent was doing what I was hoping it was doing. But you don't know. Sometimes you have a set and you think that the prevailing wind's going to continue, but then it hits the terrain, does something totally different. And you learn that by making mistakes, and spooking deer when you think, well, the wind's supposed to do this, and weather.com says it's going to do this, and then you get in there, but it hits this inside corner of a food plot, or this thicket of pines, and it goes and makes a 90-degree turn to one side, and now the wind's not so great, but you keep hunting it because you're like, well, the weather.com says ABC, and it's just not doing that.
Right.
Because the prevailing wind doesn't mean jack squat. And so communicating that with, the combination of being patient, being observant, and learning in real time, because it's a moving target too, and you have to it just takes a few years to learn how all those pieces of the puzzle go put together. and you have to screw it up enough to like for the light bulb, at least for me, multiple times
I'm with
for me
you.
to learn. It's like, Sean, come on, this is
Yeah,
can't be doing this way.
I'm with you. And
Yeah.
honestly, I got to see that video you posted, and that was super cool, man, because just being able to see that your scent be able to travel above like the wood line too. I was really
Mm-hmm.
impressed by that. Yeah, that was a
Yeah, it's
great
cool.
visual. I'm a visual learner, or
Yeah, me
learn
too. I
by
love to see
mistake.
it.
But man, it's been a blast having you back on, dude. I'm sure we'll love to have you back on again down the road, man. Is there anything else you want to throw anything out there for mature whitetail strategies? I know, like I said earlier in the podcast, guys, go join his YouTube, subscribe. I promise you'll enjoy it. It's got a ton of great content on there.
Yeah, my YouTube channel is Mature Whitetail Strategies. My Instagram is just Shan Twit, ShanTwit, and I have all sorts of little clips in there that I don't have on my YouTube and vice versa. So, in closing, I would say, it's you don't have to try and reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do everything by yourself, and sometimes it's good to get a third person perspective to look at your situation and just think about it and act on it just slightly different. At 211 degrees, I always say water's hot, but at 212 it boils, and the difference is 1 degree. Makes the outcome completely different. But sometimes you can't see it, just like with relationships. You can't see the relationship, good or bad, for what it is until someone else that you trust says, "Hey, this is not good," or "This is good." And I've been down that road too. On a humanity, personal level. In relationship that I've been in, and you can't see it. So you think you can, but you can't see it because you're in it. You're too close to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's an emotional component, and it kind of clouds your judgment. Sometimes you just have to see things from a different perspective, and that's all the difference that it makes.
Yeah, I love it, man. Absolutely. Great analogy. Well, Sean, thank you again, sir. I appreciate you, man. And I will be keeping up with you. Appreciate you guys tuning in this week, and we look forward to catching up with y'all next week.